All right, today we're going to dive deep into the world of one of your immune system's most amazing and, honestly, most formidable players. Get ready to meet your body's very own elite special forces. So, let me just start with a question for you. When a rogue cell in your body decides to turn cancerous, or a virus tries to hijack your system, who are the absolute first responders on the scene? Who are the guards that don't need a special invitation to take out a threat? Well, the answer is the natural killer cell, or NK cell for short, and you should really think of them as elite sentinels. See, unlike other parts of your immune system that have to be trained to recognize a specific enemy, NK cells are already out there, always on patrol, just scanning for trouble and ready to act immediately. Okay, so here's a quick look at what we're going to cover. First, we'll see how these cells even spot the enemy and how they get their orders. Then, we'll dive into their lethal toolkit, look at the crucial safety switches that prevent friendly fire, and finally, we'll see how science is figuring out how to supercharge these defenders. Let's get into it. First things first, spotting the enemy. I mean, how does this elite guard possibly know who's a friend and who's a foe? Well, it all comes down to a really advanced sensor suite. You have to picture the surface of an NK cell. It's absolutely covered in this complex network of receptors. You can think of them as tiny molecular scanners, constantly feeling out the other cells they bump into. And they're looking for very specific signals that basically scream, I'm stressed out or I'm infected. And these sensors really fall into two main categories. First up, you've got the activating receptors. These are your threat detectors. They're the ones that spot those stress signals and give the attack command. Then you have the chemokine receptors. These act like a cellular GPS system, guiding the NK cell directly to the scene of the crime, whether it's an infection or a tumor. So, okay, the cell can find its target, but what tells it to actually pull the trigger? That brings us to our next section, receiving mission intel. Because spotting a threat is one thing, getting the official green light to engage is something else entirely. That mission intel comes in the form of cytokines. These are just tiny signaling proteins that are sent out by other immune cells. Think of them as chemical messages that tell the NK cell to power up, to multiply its forces, and to get ready for a full-on assault. Some of these key signals, like interleukin-15 or IL-15, are basically the command to go to high alert. And of course, to receive this kind of intel, the cell needs the right equipment. It uses these dedicated cytokine receptors to pick up on those specific signals, just to make sure the message from immune command comes through loud and clear. All right, the NK cell has identified its target and it has received its orders. So now, for the good part, the action. It's time to open up the lethal toolkit. This is where the killer part of its name really shines. This whole kill sequence is a super precise four-step process. First, it locks onto the target, then it delivers a payload from these tiny packets called cytotoxic granules. Now, cytotoxic just means toxic to cells, and these packets are filled with two key proteins. One is called perforin, and it acts like a molecular hole punch, just creating pores in the target cell's outer wall. Then granzyme B swoops in through those holes and delivers the final command. It triggers a program called apoptosis, which is basically telling the rogue cell to self-destruct. It's brutal and effective. But with all of this destructive power, you have to have some control, right? A weapon this potent can't just be running around unchecked. And that brings us to the all-important built-in safety switches. This is all about preventing friendly fire. So when an NK cell gets that cytokine intel, it doesn't just go wild. That signal triggers a very specific internal circuit called the JAK-STAT pathway. You can think of it like the wiring that connects the receive signal button to the launch attack systems. It's what flips on the specific genes needed for the mission. But listen, you can't have an accelerator without a brake. The whole immune system is a balancing act, and a protein called CISH is one of those crucial brakes. It puts a check on that JAK-STAT pathway, making sure the NK cell doesn't go into overdrive and start harming healthy tissue. If we dig even deeper, the cell's basic abilities are governed by its internal programming. We're talking about proteins called transcription factors. They are kind of like the software developers for the cell. You've got ones like T-bet and Eomes, which are the master regulators. They're the ones writing the code that makes an NK cell a killer in the first place. Others, like STAT4 and STAT5, are key players in helping it respond to that mission intel, while a protein like c-Myc is there to manage its power supply for the fight. So, this brings us to the really exciting part, where all this fundamental knowledge crashes into the future of medicine. It's time to talk about supercharging our defenders. So get this. What if a cancer cell is clever enough to hit the NK cell's brakes for it, shutting down the whole attack? This happens all the time. But now, scientists have figured out that by targeting these safety switches, these so-called checkpoints, we can release the brakes and unleash the NK cell's full raw power against these diseases. And there are two main ways they're doing this. On one hand, you've got checkpoint blockades. This uses antibody drugs to temporarily block one of those stop signals. It's like putting a block under the brake pedal. On the other hand, you have checkpoint knockouts. This is where scientists actually genetically engineer the NK cell to completely remove the gene for a brake. So this is like removing the brake pedal entirely, creating an incredibly persistent, relentless killer cell. At the end of the day, it all comes down to this simple idea. By deeply understanding every single part of the NK cell's toolkit, its sensors, its communication lines, its weapons, and its safety switches, and that leaves us with a really fascinating final thought, and taking off their safety locks to fight diseases like cancer. So the question is, what's next?